Alright guys, to get started, you should have already completed the first part of this exercise. If you look at the exercise instructions, I would have given you several different materials to create a variety of shapes from. Now these materials could have been wires, or they could have been scotch tape, or they could have been just little junk things that I found. You can really use any objects that you want. But what you're going to do with those objects are create a variety of different shapes, these kinds of shapes from here. And I want you to photograph these shapes, use your own phone camera or your professional camera, and somehow load them onto your computer. Now when you make these shapes, don't think that you just have to make one of them. Make several different dots or several different circles or lines or triangles to choose from. The more variety you have, the better this will actually work out. I've already done a couple of these. I'm going to show you the basic principle that we're going for. So here's the objects that I photographed. You can see some of these didn't turn out so well. So obviously this one's very blurry, but this is good. This is a really good one. This was a great one to work from. Also pay attention to how I photograph these. You want to have a good contrast between your object and the background. So if I've got a dark object, I've got a light background or a white piece of paper that I put them from. If I had a light background, let's see if I can find, like this one really didn't work out so well, but I'll show you what I can use. So this is light on top of light. But if you've got a light background, here we are, like this one, give it a dark background to work from. Also, the final thing, whenever you make these shapes, don't think that they have to be a perfect circle or a perfect shape. Let them have a little bit of ambiguousness to it. Let the object itself show through. Because when we start making our alphabet, then you'll start having some character to go with that as well. We are going to be creating an alphabet, but for this one, I don't want you to use the regular Roman alphabet. Instead, you would have chosen either the Greek or the Hebrew alphabet, depending on the verse that I gave you, and you'll be working from one of these templates. So you'll need to download the appropriate template that goes along with the verse that you either assigned or that you picked up. Alright, so once that's done and you've taken your photographs of your different objects, let's jump into Illustrator and get started. I'm in Illustrator. We'll go to File, Create New. As far as the size of the document goes, this first one doesn't matter, but I like working in 11 by 17. So 11 by 17, and we won't worry about the bleeds or anything else. We'll just say okay to that and work from here. Now what we need to do is to vectorize the shape of the objects that we have. In other words, we want to take each one of these pictures, we want to take each one of these pictures and turn them into a vectorized shape. Now we've used the pen tool and the drawing tools before to do this, but I want to show you a technique that allows you to do this very, very quickly. Okay, so jumping back into Illustrator, the first thing we need to do is to place our object into here. You can do this two different ways. The quickest way is to simply drag your picture into here, and it will place it towards the center. Now my image is very, very large in resolution, so I'm going to zoom back out. Then use my selection tool, the black arrow, to scale it down. Make sure you hold down your Shift key when you do this. So I'm holding Shift. And once I have it down to a size that I like, I'll just place it onto my board. Now, with the image still selected, look at the very top for the word Image Trace. Image Trace, when I click on it, it's going to give me a little error saying, hey, are you sure you want to do this? What it's going to do is to look at all the contrasting edges within your photograph and try to vectorize it, turn it into an actual vector shape. Now since this is a large image, I am getting this little warning, but that's okay. We'll say okay to that. It will take just a couple of seconds depending on the size of your image, but it's looking for those lights and darks, and you can see it quickly vectorized my image. Now if I zoom in, you can see it's no longer giving me the jagged pixelated edge, it's actually finding those particular shapes. Now the downside to this is that it doesn't do a good job of defining exactly what the shape is. You can see in the shadow areas it's a little ambiguous and a little bit choppy. Now that may be something that you're looking for, all those little extra kind of rough edges adds a little bit of character and texture to what we're trying to create. But you can control the light and dark areas of this. If you go back to the top, I've still got my image selected. Look for this little icon, and this is your image trace panel. These are all of the options that allows you to control how your image can be traced and vectorized off. Now, there are some presets, and by default, it's set to a black and white. But it can do some high quality photos and give a lot of different colors. You can set it to choose just 3 colors or 6 or however many that you want. It doesn't have to be filled in objects. It can do sketching and line art as well. But for what we're going to do, we're going to keep it at default and just change out the threshold. The threshold is more or less dark. If I move this slider down, watch it change, and it'll actually make the image much lighter, and it cleans up the edges here, but we do lose a little bit of detail. Conversely, if I go back to more, it'll get a little bit darker, and in this case actually blow it out. So finding that little bit of balance between the threshold to give you the correct amount of detail that you want, I'll leave that up to you. Also pay attention that in this case I've got some extra objects or extra bits that I don't want to have. Alright, so once you get it the way you want, the last thing we need to do is to be able to erase away unwanted things. I've still got it selected. Go up to the very top and hit expand, and this will break it apart, and now you can see the individual vector points. I can go in and be able to erase away all of my different parts. Now here's what I want to erase away. I'm going to scoot this over onto the gray off my artboard to show you what we have. It does have a black area, and it's also got the white areas to it. Let's get rid of this dark line around the outer edge. We'll go up to Object and ungroup it. This means it'll break everything apart. I can then click on this black part here and delete it away, and I can click on any white areas that I want to get rid of, because all I want to have left is just the black outline of my object. Now you can see I can go through and delete the individual paths, but this may take me forever, especially if I've got a bunch of little bits down here. So here's a way of quickly selecting the same color. So I'm going to select something white. In this case, the white fill color, you'll notice, has been loaded up in my fill options. Go to select the same fill color, and this will get everything that is white. And I can hit delete on my keyboard, and it deletes all of those away. So it's a great, quick, awesome way of selecting the same color and getting rid of it that you don't want. Alright, with that done, I'm going to select my object again. I'm going to regroup it, so go to Object and Group. There it is there. And I'm going to keep it off to the edge, off to this side. Another thing I'm going to do, let's put this on its own layer so I don't accidentally delete it when I start doing other ones. So I've got my Layers palette open. I'm going to lock down Layer 1 and just create a new layer to work on. Let's do another one. So let's go back to our objects. This time let's do one that's white with a dark background. I think I have some tape. Yeah, this one. So this one we'll drag onto our object, onto our work area. I'll zoom out a little bit. Excuse me. Remember to hold down Shift to scale it down. With it still selected, look up at the top and choose Image Trace. We'll say OK to that warning. And by default, it gave it 50-50 black and white. This is where we open up our image trace options. Remember, you can find these options if you look for this icon at the top of your screen. And let's play around with the threshold. So I can pull this in. That's going to make it a little bit lighter. Not what I want. Let's pull it over towards the darker area and get some dark spots. There we go. I'm wanting to see what makes up that particular bit. I do want it to be destroyed. If you didn't know, there's also some advanced features, and this will allow you to pick out things like your paths and how many corners, how much detail you can do. You can even tell it to ignore white, and so it'll completely get rid of the white area, leaving you with a black outline. In our case, for this one, we actually want to keep the white. We don't want to get rid of anything that's white on here, so we'll keep it at that. Once I got something that I like, we'll go up to Expand at the very top. It'll break this apart. Then we'll go to Select, Object, and we'll ungroup this object. Now we need to get rid of everything that's black on here. So I'll choose this and hit Delete. Or I can go to Select the same fill color since I have black selected, and we'll delete those away. Uh-oh, I can't see it. Let's select everything. Command A. I'm just going to turn it red so I know what it looks like. So now we can get rid of these extra little bits that were off to the side. Once it's done, I'll select my finished object. I'm going to turn it black and go up to Object and group it together. So that's the basic thing that we want to do. Keep grouping these, keep vectorizing these things, bring them in, choose image trace, and do that for all of the different objects that you photographed. When you're finished, you should have a nice collection of different shapes and different objects pulled off to the side, each one perhaps on its own different layer so that you don't accidentally delete it, and we'll be ready for the next process. So I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit and pause my video, and the next time you see me, I'll have them all finished. Alright, so I didn't do all of them, but you can see I've got a good variety of objects to start off with. Remember, you should have several different objects to pick and choose from, each one having different shapes. But once you've got all of yours done, let's create a new document. I know in the instructions it may say to create a new layer, but I'm going to do a whole new document by itself. So File and New. The size of this document does need to be a tabloid, so 11 by 17, and we're in the portrait orientation. We'll say OK to that. The next thing we'll need to do is to place our template into here. Now I'm going to work through the Hebrew template simply because it's a little bit more challenging. So to do this, let's go to File and Place. I've got mine saved on the desktop as Alphabet Hebrew. We'll choose Place, and I'll click once to place it right here in the middle. And I want this to be a template layer. Since I'm working in layer 1, I can double click the layer to bring up the options. You can even call it template for now. We'll choose template and it will dim it down just a little bit. We'll say OK, but it'll allow us to see it and not be able to edit or work on this. This means in the next layer, this is where we need to place all of our different objects into. So I'm going to jump back into my objects and I'll unlock them. I'll hit Command A to select all, copy it, jump back into our new document, and then Command V to paste them into here. As far as the size of these objects goes, it really doesn't matter, just something that's manageable that you can pick and choose from. So we're going to wind up changing these up anyway. Let's take this one letter at a time, and I'll bring these over so we can see what we're working with. The first one in Hebrew is the Aleph. And notice that I'm giving you a serif and a sans serif version of all of these different letters. So even in different languages, there are different shapes. But pay attention to the make of each one of these shapes. What does it take to create an Aleph? You've got a horizontal dash, you've got some little arms and feet that go along with this. There's even some little finishers on some of these strokes. Unless you're doing a sans serif, and then you can see where each of the shoulders and arms and different things are for these letters. Do pay attention to the details because some of these letters look very, very similar to each other. For instance, here is the Hey and here is the Chet. And if you didn't notice those or didn't know before, the Hey has a little break right here, but the Chet does not have a little break right here. So that little break is very, very important. Also pay attention to where they fall on the X height or your baseline. Things like the yod doesn't fall on the baseline, it's actually above the X height line for this particular letter. Things like the lamed have an ascender that goes above their main height. And so little details like those are things that you need to create and pay attention to, especially for the next part of the next exercise. But let's go back to the LF. Let's actually create one of the letters. We're going to take this one bit at a time, and I'm going to look for some object that will give me each of the parts of this. So I'm going to take an object and create that horizontal dash. Now I can use anything that's here, and we can actually rotate it and skew it and create the necessary parts that we want to work with. Now let's see, I want to choose, let's say I'll choose this one. I'm going to make a copy of this object, so Command C and V to paste it. I am working on a copy simply because I don't want to destroy my original. And I'm going to take this object and let's erase away. I want to keep this top part. There is an eraser tool, and it works kind of like a brush. To change the size of your eraser tool, use the open and close brackets on your keyboard, and this will allow me to erase away any parts that I don't want to keep. And as long as I've got the object selected, it'll erase that away nice and tidily there. So it'll leave me with this part, and I can rotate it and get it into place how I want. And if I wanted to make this other part a little bit bolder, let's say I took this part and let's squish it up. The main thing is I want you to play around with the objects that you have. Now the more you can see your object and actually tell what it is, kind of the more successful that your style will become. But I'm just taking little parts of everything that I have and recreating these. Let's do the arms now. So maybe I'll use this part, copy it over, use my eraser, and I really like this bottom part. So I want to keep that. Rotate it sideways, scale it down. This is even giving me that little finial at the top. And oh, let's do something different for the bottom. I'll copy this part over again and reuse it. You'll find that a lot of your shapes can be reused in several different places. What I'll ask you to do, and you don't have to do this, is try to get a different shape. Even if it looks similar, try to get a different shape for every letter that you have. This way every letter looks unique and it doesn't look like you're trying to recreate or recopy something. There's nothing worse than seeing a logo that all they did was recopy the different various bits when they could have gotten away with something custom. Let's see, maybe I'll even round off these edges just a little bit more. There's that, yeah. Alright, now let's attach something to here. Maybe I'll get a little piece of this wire. We'll scale it down. Use that to bend into it. We'll do the same thing from down here. If you need to reflect something, you can have it selected. I hold down my control key, click on it, choose transform, and here's my, whoops, come on. There's my reflect. And so reflecting something will allow you to flip it either horizontally or vertically. And we'll do that for this one just so it'll connect up. Actually, let's rotate it all the way around so I can put that up into there. Okay, that's getting pretty close to it. I'm not 100% satisfied. Let's give it a little bit of a finial up here at the top. So maybe I'll erase away part of this. The main thing is you're using your drawing tools, you're using the objects that you created, and your eye, there we go, to forcibly make the different objects. And it's very unique. It's a grungy font that has never existed before, and you created it by using these various different objects. Now you saw how quickly I created this Aleph font, and I can again go back and start tweaking this and using it. But once you get a shape that you like, select it all, that particular shape, go up to Object, group it together so that it doesn't get destroyed or distorted anywhere else. Do this for each of the letters that we have on your screen, all the way down to the very end. Once you've finished, you should have a document that looks close to something like this. Now you've got an entire alphabet that you can use to create your own custom designs from. And if you look closely, even at this alphabet, you can see little parts that I did reuse. Like, I really like the way this was done. I think this was done using tape. So you can see this part was also repeated in various other little parts of the other characters as well. Once this is finished, we'll go back to here. We'll go up to File and do a save. I want you to save this as an Illustrator document, so make sure to call it Hebrew alphabet. I'm going to add my name to it. And upload this Illustrator document to the Moodle page.